And a very good evening, everybody, and a welcome to our Lyceum night, coming to you from the Paul Spiritualist Church. And we're down on the south coast in Paul in the UK. We have a wonderful gentleman for you tonight, absolutely delightful. I had a great pleasure of being interviewed by Jason for his podcasts. So I just thought it'd be nice and reciprocal if we could have him back on our Lyceum to share thoughts. Jason Connolly, good evening, sir.
Good evening. It's lovely to be on here, and it's an honour because I've watched many of these, and when you asked me, I was very excited to come on and have a chat with you again. So thank you.
Good. I know we must stop meeting like this.
We must. And every time we meet, you're always in your absolutely beautiful church there, flying the flag for Paul.
Thank you. Jason, question, please. When we have these meetings with different people, one of the most commonest things people want to try and know, understand, or learn is your involvement with spiritualism. Where did that begin, please?
So it began, let me put this light back on. I had a nice light shining on me there. There we go. So my granddad was a medium, which was how it all started. And this was before the days, obviously, of the internet, Lawrence. And I would see him regularly go to his own spiritualist church, and he would regularly do platform, and he'd have people coming to him. So that was my kind of first awareness of the spirit world and spiritualism. But sort of back when he was alive, I always had an interest in the spirit world, but more sort of for the funny stories and for what he would tell me about the paranormal, plant pots spinning round when my mum would tell me stories all the time of different things that had happened in one of their original houses. And that was my kind of doorway into it. But I was sort of more interested in the tarot and stuff like that. And he got unwell when I was in my early 20s. And at that time, I was kind of flying around the world as cabin crew for Virgin Atlantic, which I started when I was 19. So I wasn't really having questions about death and this sort of thing. And it was only when I was on a holiday with my mum, and this was years after he'd passed away due to cancer quite quickly. And we'd been to spiritualist churches sort of on and off over the years. We'd go to Sunday services, but we'd never be the people that got the message or we'd never get a message, very, very rarely. But at that point, we were very fortunate not to know many of people who'd passed away except for him. So we would always be hoping we'd get a message from him. And then I guess when I first started coming into this world was when I was on a holiday in Greece with my mum. And I don't know how we got onto the subject of it, but she started talking about death. And I just said, look, I'm petrified of it. Like, I don't want to talk about it at all. It's not something that, I just don't even want to think about it. Then she gave me a book by Teresa Chung. It was called Proof of Heaven. And it was all these different stories of people who had near-death experiences. And then I don't know how, I started researching near-death experiences, and then that led me on to go to a psychic lady who I went to this lady's house. I don't even know how I came across her, but she did like a psychic awareness day, and I did quite like it. And at the time, she just mentioned in passing about the Arthur Findlay College, and about 5 years ago, I decided to just turn up to this college. I didn't even know anything about it, really, and I don't even know what made me want to go, and it was quite funny, really, because I turned up and not knowing what to expect at all, not even realising the tutors or the mediums that I was going there to see. And the only thing I wanted was actual proof that the spirit world really existed. Because although I believed in it a lot, because we'd been on ghost hunts, me and my mum, a lot as well. But, that's not really the best doorway into spiritualism, is it? Because I said to Adam Berry as well a little while ago, because I said at first I used to find the whole thing, a bit scary. And he said, well, it's hardly surprising when you one of your most recent ghost hunts was to Shepton Mallet prison. I said, yes, I can understand where you're coming from now. But from then on in, I just keep being drawn back to it, and I've had the recent acceptance of I am a medium, rather than always saying, I'm developing my mediumship or I'm trying to unfold it. I've now accepted, yes, I am a medium and I have had this ability all my whole life, but only recently I've come to that, realization.
That's quite a big step to say that. I'm really glad that you brought that into the conversation, because it is, we do have an awful lot of the perpetual students. I'm learning to become a medium. I'm learning to develop I'm learning. And, these people have been doing it for how many years? I'm thinking, my goodness, if this was a driving lesson, you'd be a driving school's dream, because you'd be there every year. But it is something, and it's a really interesting mental shift with mediums to go from that I'm learning, because we're always plagued by self-doubt, aren't we?
We are. Yeah. And it's one of the biggest things that hold us back in our mediumship. And for ages, what was stopping my mediumship really unfolding? Well, I'll tell you a funny story. This is what happened. So I went to the college and I was on this course, and in the very first day there, my granddad came through with evidence that was just irrefutable. There was no way in the world that I couldn't now not believe in it, because what was said was just so powerful in that moment, and it was how it felt to me. So the next day, I was used to talking at work, going up and speaking in front of conferences and whatever. So I wasn't nervous to throw my hat in the ring, so to speak. But we went into the college, into the sanctuary, and the exercise they were doing was you had to bring through a spirit communicator, and they'd got up a few advanced mediums, what I would deem to be advanced, people from, advanced groups. And then the tutor said, would you like to come up? And I sort of said, oh, why not? And they said, man, what I want you to do, sort of leading me into it, I want you to sort of get a spirit communicator. I said, yes, I think I've got one. And they said, where in the room do you think you might be? Sort of all this 100 people there. And I don't know what happened. I just said, that lady right there, you, yes, you right at the back. And all of a sudden I did this communication, and it was still one of the best communications I'd ever done. But then the problem was I could never recreate that. And it kept happening all week like this. And then when I left for the year afterwards, I was like, what happened there? And why can't I recreate that? And I now know that obviously the spirit world was showing me my potential. But, after that week, I was very, very intrigued. But then it was the case of having to put the work in. But one of the biggest things that stopped me, and I think it stops a lot of people in their mediumship, is trying to develop one's mediumship or getting lost in techniques. And that just puts you up in your head, doesn't it?
Very much, very much. Before we continue, a quick couple of hellos. Got lovely Matt with us. Good evening, Matt. Elspeth, right the way up in the Shetlands. How are you? Up Helly. I've been following the Up Helly in the Shetlands. Looks fabulous. Wonderful Marion Frisbee. Marion, good evening, darling. Lynn is joining us from Canada. So good evening to everybody so far.
Hello.
But yeah, I love that, because you do have these moments. It's like a flash of brilliance, isn't it? But as you quite rightly say, it's the spirit world showing you your potential. It's sort of like, this is what you could do. It's a bit like, I went to a patisserie class because it suits me, because I like sweets and I like...
Who doesn't?
I know. I like sweets and I like perfection. And whenever I went in, when I was living abroad, you go into these patisserie shops and you're just like, wow, not only the sweet, it is the, the whole construction of it. And I was like, wow, well, I did one tray and that worked out fine. Then the rest of the day, it just went horribly downhill. And by the end of the day, I was this snarling Wolverine in the corner, throwing egg custard at anybody who dare come within 10 feet of me. But we had that moment of perfection, which was wonderful. Do you think I get thoughts in my head, which sort of follow me around for a while. And the current one is when we are in the midst of a communication, do you think it may be a stumbling block to mediums because we're trying to weave that information into a story or a format that we understand? But actually, we're not going. I had an experience, and it was about a child being named after a grandfather. I've got no experience in that field. I've got no experience, no understanding. So there wasn't that familiarity there. And I often think, I wonder if, because I think sometimes we try too hard on the platform.
Well, I think we want to get it right, don't we? And I think we care so much about. And when we're wanting to develop our mediumship, I think firstly we all, most of us go into this because we want to help, or we understand the gravity and the sacredness of what it is that we're doing, and we want to do a good job. But I think one of the biggest things that has really held me back in my mediumship is the very simplicity of it. In every other area of our life, we are taught from a young age, you need to try hard, you need to work hard. Success does not come easily. And even myself, with what I've done in my career, it's always been in sort of instilled in me that, even being in the sales industry for such a long time, that I have to work hard. And with mediumship, it's the beauty and the simplicity of it. And it took me a long time to even work out how to quieten my mind enough to even feel that I can build on that connection. And I think you go through stages as well with your mediumship, where you go from, I think there's a lot to be said from that stage of going from believing to knowing, as well. And when I look back at, even the journey of my mediumship and mediumship in general, you really have to dig deep and do a lot of your own sort of personal growth and development work, because the two just go hand in hand as well. So, and I think that through developing my mediumship, it's helped, in every area of my life. It's not just exclusive to that. But the simplicity of it is what I find so difficult in a way.
Yes. Yeah, because we have to think about everything, don't we?
We do.
Going down the road to the shops, we've got to think, all right, number one, have I got a bag? Because I don't want to spend 40p on a bag. So have I got a bag? Have I got my money? Have I got my card? Is it raining? Can I walk? Is there a but? Is the cut? And everything we do, even the most simplest of tasks, involve this complex mind maze of organizing everything. And all we want is to go down the road and get half a dozen bread rolls. But we just go through all this process to put ourselves in the position to do it. But like you say, when it comes to the mediumship, it is about letting all that go.
It is.
And just sticking with what you're shown. There's a very common phrase, say what you get. And
there is.
So true.
But it a lot of the time, even for me, and I didn't even realize I would do this for such a long time, I get a piece of evidence, and the first thing it does is automatically go up in my head to try and place it. But I wasn't even aware for a long time that I was actually doing that. And I actually spoke to Andy, a medium called, a really beautiful soul, and a great medium called Andy Bing, on my podcast, but the episode hasn't come out yet. For anyone who goes to look for it now. But he was saying that when you get a piece of evidence, what the spirit world are normally giving you is a memory. They're giving you, and what we do you know, in the early stages, or, you know, a lot of mediums do it as they go through, is you're looking for evidence, piece, you know, almost like trying to tick boxes. And he said, and it really resonated with me because it made me think of a reading I'd done recently. And he said that when you get that piece of evidence, so recently, for instance, I was doing a reading for someone and I had a memory come through of this man standing outside kind of like an Italian restaurant, sorry, with all sorts of, you know, vegetables hanging out the front on bits of string and whatever. And then I moved on past that and just went on to the next piece of evidence. But actually, this was kind of almost in a tuition scenario. The person who was leading the exercise said to me, no, go back. What's he doing outside that shop? And I said, I kind of think he's inviting me in. So then when I went in, and I think we spoke about this actually on the podcast, it was all about that restaurant. It was a family restaurant. It'd been there for decades. People had had their weddings there. And I think to myself, how many times in my early days would I get that piece of evidence and move on? But normally it's by going into that experience, whether it's, you know, I've had recently done a reading where someone was showing me a Christmas scene in a family, and it was all about how important Christmas was and those memories. But, you know, even that, when he said, go into the emotion, go into the memory, that really struck a chord for me, the way he said that, because I thought, yes, we need to be less about the evidence and the ticking boxes and more going into what is that person trying to communicate to us, not just looking for, you know, name, street address, this, that, the other.
Inside leg measurement.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I do see this with a lot of people. Some people can be very formulaic in their set out of demonstrations. And by about the third message, you know what's going to come next, because they will just go through this check sheet of things. Really interesting exercise. You can do this. Deliver a message on the first piece of evidence you get.
We never do that, do we? That's not a traditional thing to do. That's at the end, Laurie.
Yeah. But you've just said it about with the shop. The first piece of evidence is a shop. And when you go in, why? It's like peeling an onion. It's taking all the layers away. Or why? Why am I outside your shop? Why is this shop important? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And you can do that. You can take that first piece of evidence and really go into it and then create the story. Now, for me, my personal preference for a reading is if I have a story being told to me, not age, height, rank, number.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, and just going right into that story, because that is something we can do. That is something, and it's really exciting when you just follow that thread and just go, okay, why are we in this shop then? Oh, what's the story of the shop? Why is that over there? And all these little things. You mentioned there, Andy Bing, how wonderful, on your podcast. So how did it's SoulSync, isn't it, your podcast site?
Yeah, it is. It's well, do you know, sync, to synchronize. It's not just SoulSync. And I started it at the kind of beginning of my mediumship journey about 4 years ago. And I kind of feel that I've learned as much on it probably as everyone else, but it's a podcast that talks a lot about mediumship, but everything else, from energy to consciousness to we've had a lot of people on who've talked even about things like psychedelics, ayahuasca, where that sits in things, tribes. But it's all things that are topics that I feel are there to help people on their journey. And it's all about discovering ultimately truth and what truth really looks like. And it's ever more evolving down a mediumship path. I don't know necessarily why that is, but that seems to be the way that the podcast is going. But it's, you know, we've also had some really interesting guests on with some honestly crazy stories of things involving the paranormal. At the very beginning, actually, what's quite interesting about the podcast is it's kind of followed my own journey and evolution in my mediumship, so far as at the start of the podcast, there was a lot of me trying to understand the spirit world, how it works, life after death, what that looks like, what happens when we die, what happens when we're born, you know, what is a soul's plan, past lives, what are Akashic records. And as my mediumship has progressed, the podcast is now, we're going through an era of really talking about the technicality of mediumship, messages, development, but it's listened to by people all over the world. But interestingly, a lot of people in very remote parts of the world that are trying to unfold their own mediumship, where they've got no churches. You know, we're spoiled in this country. But, you know, there's people in very remote parts of the world that don't even live in a culture that, you know, this is accepted, or, you know, they wouldn't even know where to find a medium. So it never fails to amaze me, the emails that come in from all around the world of people on their own journey. The amount of times I've been asked to try and describe the power, and I still have an issue sometimes of trying to articulate, because, you know, that's the thing, when you try and explain these unhumanly concepts that are bigger than, you know, language itself, there's a lot to be said for one's ability to use analogies in order to try and describe these things. And that was something else in the podcast at the very beginning, the amount of questions that were on there about the power, because even I couldn't understand what the power was at the beginning, and how I switch it on and how I switch it off.
Yeah. That is so true. So I've put the link to your YouTube part.
Yes.
That's in the comments there for everybody. Another quick hello to Sharon, to Jody, and Debbie from America. Good evening, all. So I want to go back there. I'm going to keep doing that. I want to go back there. You were saying about the difficulty in explaining things. Something I've noticed, and something I'm conscious and aware of, is an awful lot of, and I'm talking here in spiritualism, but obviously this will extend to different aspects of spirituality. You mentioned ayahuasca. We did have a practitioner down here practice that. I saw the effects and I chickened out, I'm afraid.
Sidestepped it with probably some good reason as well.
Well, I'm a bit of a control monkey, and I went, oh, no, that's really going to upset me. But anyway, but it's all about the experience. And this is something that has been neglected, in my opinion, about the experience. I was very fortunate to sit in physical development groups and physical demonstrations and seances in my younger years. The phenomena was wow, absolutely wow, but the experience of being in that atmosphere, being in that presence, feeling that presence, that had more effect than anything spinning around the room, moving, different voices. Yeah, they were all part of the phenomena. That was amazing. But the actual experience, that we can bring that experience. I mean, I encourage it here in the church. I say to people, you know, what we try and do is spirit discarnate is coming through spirit incarnate to you, spirit incarnate. But you should then be linking back to that discarnate, so you get that feel. And it just makes my day when people say, "Oh my God, I could feel my dad there," because that stays with people rather than an endless list of he was 6'2", eyes are blue, fair hair, which is wonderful.
You make a good point, because when you're trying to get proof of whatever it is on your own stage of your journey, and I think to myself, when I was looking for proof of the spirit world, I would be expecting something to slap me in the face in terms of a sign or synchronicity. And I would hear people talk in books about, oh, this happened and this feather dropped at the right time, or this bird appeared on my fence, and I take that to be a sign of someone passing. But the problem is with all these things is it's about how it feels to you. So I've had synchronicities happen to me, and I've tried to explain them to other people, and they say, oh, yes, I can see what you're saying there. but it hasn't touched them or made them feel the same way. And it goes back to, the most impactful readings I've ever had mediumistically is when that evidence isn't just evidence. It hits me and it touches my heart because of the personality coming through or that memory. But as this is where we get in our heads as mediums at times, is when we're trying to deliver a message, we're thinking, oh, we have to be right, we have to get it absolutely correct, and that and then that I always feel like the message is kind of lost in that, and it shines out to me in the times when the readings that have always touched my heart the most is the ones where I could feel my granddad or whoever it was in front of me, because that person was bringing through the true essence of them.
This is true. And again, this links back to something that was brought up earlier on tonight, about, as mediums, do we sometimes try too hard to make a communicator's story make sense to us?
Yes.
And this is where we can fall into that trap of doing evidence. I mean, we used to operate the old CERT technique. You familiar with that?
No. Do tell me.
Used to be taught a lot in many places. It was communicator, evidence, reason for coming, tie up.
Tie up. That's a nice word at the end.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Wrap it up now.
Yeah, tie it up now. Yeah, love you very much. We're off for a beer. But that was the formula that was used as the basis for many teachings. But you do find, when you, like your experience there with the Italian restaurant, when you immerse yourself into that memory and going deeper into that memory, what we understand as evidence today of 6'2", eyes of blue, size 7 feet, they sort of disappear. If you were to bring through my mother and gave the physical description and everything, yeah, I understand that. That's fine. But if you brought through my mother and said, "Oh God, do you remember the time she set fire to your hair? Do you remember the time? Oh, do you remember at the wedding she dropped the ham?" Yes. Or when I'm with your mother, do you know what? I've got poodles everywhere. Do you know what that is? That to me is the story then coming out.
Well, I guess I always think that when a spirit person is coming here to communicate, I can't imagine the amount of effort that must take, because I've now come to the belief that, and I'm sure, I don't know what you think, but I believe it takes them a lot of effort, because I've also monitored certain family members of mine that like to come through. And so for instance, whenever my granddad has come through, he has always been a very good communicator, but I believe that to be because he was a medium. And I believe that his communication has got better. But I've also noticed now, because I go on a lot of courses to develop my mediumship, I've noticed that he takes quite a lot of enjoyment in teaching the students. So I think he sees himself as a mediumship tutor from the other world now. But I've also noticed that when my nan first started coming through, she would only come through my granddad, who would speak on her behalf. Now she is fully confident. She doesn't need him. And quite frankly, when she does come through now, she will dominate throughout the week's course. She'll come through every day. But I think it takes, I actually believe that the spirit world have to go away and really learn to communicate with us like we have to communicate with them, because we're trying to go up in energy and frequency, and I can't imagine what they're having to do to go down in vibration. It must be like, oh God, I've got to come down to the earth plane tomorrow and slow down my energy. It's so dense down there, Laurie. I just can't imagine what that process looks like.
There's actually recorded an account of that. I believe it was Ursula Roberts and her guide Red Cloud.
Oh, those books are amazing.
And Red Cloud actually states it took him 7 of our years to work down through the densities of our energies to be able to be an effective communicator.
Do you know what? It's really funny you mentioned that, because I think that was the most recent book I've been reading, actually, because that was jumping out. Was that when they were talking about that he came down here in order to save humanity at the time of the war? Was that around that period? Yeah, I remember reading that. And the Earth was in such a dense place at the time that that's how long the transition took.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. I sit and talk with my team regularly. If anybody ever put a camera in my lounge, I would be in the local hospital very quickly, because I'll just sit there and suddenly I'll laugh because I have humor and humorous things are said, but we have the serious talks. And I said one day, why do I never see where the communicator is now? And the voice just came back and said, because that's their heaven, not yours. And I went, I really get that. We physical, we want physicality, do we not? You know,
we do.
If you say to people, what does heaven look like? It'd probably be a very general thing. You know, it would probably be this very earthly scene, very generalized, classic textbook thing. I'm just a great believer that it's going to be what it is. I've made a pact with myself. When it's my time to go over, I want to be back at the Queen concert at Nebworth in 1976.
Oh, you're going to time travel? Well, it doesn't exist, does it? You're going to go backwards.
Yeah, you know, when I'm there, when I find myself right down the front again, like I did then, that'll be it. That'll be my heaven. But that's going to fade away, and that's going to fall away in time.
Yes,
because we change and evolve. Here's a question for you. We just discussed Red Cloud taking 7 years to take that transition. And I mean, that's probably a very rough figure. Because
approximately.
How long before you demonstrate are those links being made by the other world with you before you demonstrate?
It's an interesting question, because when you ask that question, it makes me think back to along my own development and my own trust in myself. Don't get me wrong, whenever I go up on a platform, there's always that nervous excitement, but I kind of thrive off that. And there's something about the energy in a room of a collective people where actually I found in my own development, this might sound like absolute madness, but I've always found platform mediumship a lot easier for me than one-to-ones, because of the pressure of having someone in front of me and that expectation. I used to have instances where an hour before I knew that I was going onto a platform, having a spirit person come through, and I'd say to myself, oh, this isn't the right time now. I haven't even got, sat down and got into my power or whatever before they were coming through. And then, at times during my development, I would almost sort of try and say, no, now isn't the right time. I need to wait until just before the moment. But it's made me realize that actually sometimes I can become aware of that person hours before, because I've learned to, because I went through this point in my development where I would say, right, now is the time I'm doing mediumship. Only now, when I'm sitting in the silence and the quiet and in the lotus position, Laurie, now is the time that a spirit person can come through. Yeah. And I wasn't using mediumship at all in my day-to-day life. And it was, and because I didn't feel that was possible. I thought, oh, no, mediumship is reserved to this point. So to answer your question now, it can be because hours before, but that's because I'm open to it. Before, I didn't realize that I was putting self-imposed conditions on how my mediumship should be. But these are all different stages of my learning and my unfoldment.
I love that question. I've had many discussions based on that question. my experience, it can be days before.
That's because you're so sought after, Laurie. That's because there's a queue of people waiting to come through you.
There are people after me, but it's not to give me a message. But anyway, my experiences with this can be days before that you can just be at, because we do. You touched on it there with what you were saying about being the medium. Well, Jason, you're a medium. Full stop. All right, you're a medium now. You're going to be a medium later when you're down at the club clutching a pint of lager.
Yes.
You're going to be a medium tomorrow morning when you stood there looking at a fried egg thinking, oh, I really don't want this. This is a common thing. People go to their mediumship and say, right, now I'm going to be the medium. You are a medium. And I'm not talking about walking around being open all the time. We had somebody in the area who had a habit of standing at a bus stop and saying to people, oh, I've got your mother here. You know, that's totally inappropriate.
Yes.
You are not open to that degree and that level all the time without issues arising. But you can just touch on that sensitivity because they're so subtle sometimes. Let's have an example. Chrysanthemums. I was particularly drawn. There was a program on telly. It was the Chelsea Flower Show, and they were showing the chrysanthemums. And they showed these beautiful chrysanthemums, show quality, absolutely gorgeous. That was like on the Monday night. On the following Sunday, I was getting the church ready, and that was when we used to do an afternoon service. I was getting the church ready in the morning. I'm on one of the chairs, excuse me, was this beautiful bunch of chrysanthemums, real show quality, real striking deep purple. So I thought, oh, who's going to sit there? Everybody came in, sat down, nobody sat there. I thought, that's a shame. 3:10, knock at the door, lady, such a mare getting here, the bus was late. I said, that's right, you're here, come on in, sit there. She sat there. Great. Service finished, no message. I'm like, I've got to chase this up. I said, would you understand why there is this bunch of chrysanthemums? I said, they're not just chrysanthemums, these are show chrysanthemums. These are, you know, you would exhibit these, and in fact, you would get a little gold medal for it. And the woman said, thank you, that's what I've come for. It's my husband's anniversary today, and he used to exhibit at Chelsea. And I'm like, I find that fascinating because that thought, that image, that presence, when I was watching it, I was totally involved with what was going on with no thought of using that as something later on. I just thought, oh, I wonder, because, you know, we're open to that influence and they're drawing your attention to it.
But it's interesting because that's, you know, there'd be points in my development where I would see the chrysanthemums and think, well, is that enough? Why am I only getting that? But that was so poignant. The very, you know, motto of the story there is that was enough for that lady to really feel the presence of her husband. And it's the same, you know, when my granddad comes through, the strongest bit of evidence is he comes through with this flat cap that he used to wear. And when I hear that flat cap, I know it's him because he takes great pride in highlighting that flat cap to me.
I'm not being disrespectful to your granddad.
Yes.
But when I started developing and I was very fortunate to sit in some lovely home circles. But a common theme, people would say, oh, I've got a gentleman here and he's got a flat cap on. And this carried on for the first few years of my development. And I got to the point of thinking, so when you die, you don't get wings, you get a flat cap, it seems, because everybody's coming through with a flat cap.
It's interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. And we can go on and on forever and still not fully understand it. And that's the beautiful thing.
It is.
But with your podcast, have you found this evolution in, you touched on this with your guests and the direction of the podcast, and what's driving you to do it?
I think what's part of what's driving it is the feeling of service to that of the spirit world and listeners, because I think that a lot. Was an issue I had at the beginning. Is I felt that spirituality a lot of the time is being made to be very glossy in modern days, whereby people are put on pedestals. And part of my journey was I used to think, no, I can't be a medium because I'm not whiter than white. And I want to go out and have glasses of wine and do things that are probably irresponsible at times. So but I think there's a lot to be said for a lot of spiritual content, puts people on a pedestal and it glamorizes it. So a lot of what I wanted to do was talk about, because we talk a lot in society now about success, and we talk a lot about what success looks like. But to be successful, you have to go through challenges, trials, failures. And what we do at the moment in society is we love talking about, how we've become successful, but we don't talk about the failure. And it's by talking about the failure, which is what is going to help people get to that place. And it's the same with mediumship. I felt that a lot of mediums would talk about mediumship technically, but no one was talking about the difficult parts of their journey or the dark nights of the soul that they've been to, which is what was the point that and acted as the catalyst of their awakening. So what I wanted to do was create a podcast that focused on the gritty and the raw aspects of spirituality and the tougher times, which is why a lot of the focus in the early days was getting people on who've had extraordinary experiences, whether it was near-death experiences, people who have been to the doorway, the steps of heaven, so to speak, seen the bright shining light, and then had to walk back and come back to earth. So I think that was a big driver for a lot of it, and I think it still is. And it helps me as much as it helps everyone else, because, I've learned a lot through it, and I almost feel like it's kind of become a journal, as it were, to document my development of my relationship with the spirit world. That was a long way to answer the question, wasn't it, Laurie?
No, that's absolutely
lots of drivers.
It's wonderful. Hats off to you, because you've just opened the door to another way of thinking there about talking about the failures. Because I've done it myself tonight. Oh, I did this and we had that and this happened and that happened. It all sounds lovely. But equally, I stood up in front of a church full of people and attempted the first message, never got anywhere. Halfway through the second one, I went, do you know what? For whatever reason, this isn't working, and sat down. And I left that church railing at the spirit world. And by the time I got home, I'd realised it was me being me that was the problem.
But that one experience, how much did that probably teach you in the years to come? Yeah. You don't learn anything a lot of the time from the things that go well. Whereas we all seem to be striving for perfection so much of the time. And I think perfectionism stalls progress on a lot of things. Like, I think the amount of times, how many times do I never put that thing out or do that thing because I don't think it's perfect? Whereas actually it's perfectly imperfect. Just get it out and get it done. And that has been a lot of the driver, because it's made me have to show a lot more vulnerability through the podcast, because even myself, I could be guilty, Laurie, of hiding behind guests. It's very easy to hide behind guests on the podcast rather than speaking your own truth. So it's tested me in a lot of ways, but and as time's gone on, actually, some crazy things have happened through it. SoulSync recently, I've had a lot of emails, missing persons requests from people who've gone missing, who are reaching out to mediums who've been featured on the show. Like recently, there's a lovely medium called Jason Rothwell, and he's a lovely guy, lovely man. And he was involved in, I can't remember the whole story, but essentially, when Nicola Bully was missing, he had Nicola come through from the spirit world to direct him to where, I suppose it's a very awful part of the story, but where her body was essentially found. And he was
very well documented.
That. Yeah, and since then, we've had lots of missing person requests of people reaching out to different mediums. So it never fails to amaze me, you know, how mediums can help in, you know, a lot of different ways. And, you know, and it's things like that that, again, further drive me to want to keep doing it.
It's very true. We got a lovely comment here from Cat God. I love that name. We're going back to, you know, talking about the things that don't go well. And she's agreeing there. And true, it doesn't really help whenever people don't talk about things that can be more difficult and only present things as a cakewalk or a walk in the park. It can be frustrating and annoying.
It can. Yeah. Well, we live in the Instagram world of today, don't we? Where it's all, you know, filters and, you know, and I don't think it's not healthy for us. It's not. But I think we need to, as a society, spend more time speaking about the failures and the things that are hard and how we overcome these life challenges, because no matter how perfect someone's life might look, we all face challenges. And, you know, it can be very easy sometimes in our lives to sort of have a difficult period and be looking at other people thinking, oh, it's, you know, it's only me and only alone. You know, we're all going through one challenge or another at different periods of our life. And especially on this journey as mediums and as spiritualists, half the reason, you know, I have noticed in my years of being within this world that every single medium I've ever come across seems to have gone through some awful challenges in their life, which is what's acted as the catalyst for the awakening. You know, and there is a pattern in that. And I think that, you know, even when I look back at my own 20s, my God, it was like a roller coaster ride, Laurie. But, you know, that was what acted as the catalyst for growth.
Yeah, it's very true. When we are faced with things, that's when we're pushed, isn't it?
It is.
Obviously, as mediums and from the church point of view, an awful lot of people come because they're exploring their grief path. And that is something, it is a great honor to walk that path with them for a short time. But there's also a lot of learning. I remember at my father's funeral, I was deeply upset, shock, horror. I've just lost my dad. And I remember this person came over, and I know they were probably thinking this is a good thing to do. It really wasn't. And they said, don't worry, crying, you know, he's in a better place. And I'm just like, oh my God, please don't ever let me turn into somebody who just says these really unfortunate things like that. We learn our most when we are pushed. Another facet of that is within circles, you know, you've got some people you think, okay, they're going to do whatever, that's fine. But then you see the odd one or two come through and you go, no, you can do this. You've got the potential, and you can really push them to the point of they feel slightly uncomfortable. There's one in here tonight, lovely Jodie. I've done this with her, but really push them because they suddenly make that breakthrough because where that pressure is, and we can expand that out into today's world. You know, with all the challenges we've got a time. True. Yeah, we've got a time now which is ripe for development. It's a time now where our philosophy, our understanding of spiritualism should be a very powerful tool. And
it should be.
Yeah, and especially with the philosophical side of our work.
You just took the words out of my mouth there. I was literally thinking about, you know, how mediumship can be used in terms of philosophy and in terms of, what's the other words I'm looking for? Prophecy, that's it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, people say, "Oh, we're not allowed to prophesize," and I say, "Well, Gordon Higginson always did his New Year's séance every year, and during that time, Spirit would talk about things which would be coming up in the year. Not exact. Wouldn't say, well, France is going to go to war with Germany, but they would talk about conflict."
It's interesting. I often say to myself that with mediumship, my view is always, yes, it serves a very important place in improving life after death, especially, in the world we live in now, in allowing us to hopefully live a more happier and fulfilled life and to understand that we are limitless beings. But I also, was even thinking to myself recently about, just how beautiful, if you see trance done it well, how that can literally touch the heart of every single person in the room. And Eileen Davis said to me recently, I said, why does trance, every single person seem to really take something from it when she does it? She said to me, that's because the spirit are very aware that they'll use the collective consciousness of everyone to make sure that what comes through touches the heart of everyone in some way. And I just thought, how powerful and crazy is it that, that can happen and be done?
Yeah. But any of those working in the altered states, I mean, we do it as in our work as evidential mediums. We are in that altered state. That goes through. I am weaning myself off of the word trance, because trance has had this huge explosion, great amount of interest, but for the wrong reasons, because people have this very naive view that I'm going to sit there and go, and Spirit's going to do all the work for me, and at the end of it, I'll wake up and go, oh, well, how did that go? And it's very unfortunate.
It's very hard to get into the actual state that's close enough to drop into trance. And I think this is where it goes back to the old days of mediumship and, how people would sit and just feel the power for such a long time before they'd even get to the point of bringing, a contact or a spirit person through. But, it's in modern day society, modern day mediumship is we want to be getting straight onto that straight away. But in my times of doing trance, it took me a long time to even be able to feel that I've dropped into a deep enough state, because it's one thing doing an evidential contact where you're still, your mind is still active in some way, mental mediumship, but in trance, you're trying to allow yourself to get into that deep enough state of not even caring about, the people sitting in front of you, around you. And I found that very difficult. And when I've done trance, it's a great skill and I want to be able to develop my trance, but I found it to be so difficult. But again, it's so simple, but the simplicity is what makes it so difficult.
Well, it's practice, and practice.
Practice makes perfect, Laurie.
Well, no,
we've been hearing that for years.
Don't chase perfection.
Yes.
But yeah, with the altered state of working is not just in what we understand the way it should be demonstrated. I'm very fortunate. I've got 3 mediums who serve Paul, and their addresses are in the trance condition, and it's beautiful. Number one, when I look around the church, 90% of the people have their eyes shut. I find that fascinating, because again, it enforces this thing I talk about, the experience. When you have that true trance. I've sat in a trance den and I've just sat there going, rubbish. There was trance energy there. I see little sparkles, and it always goes along a straight line. When the medium sat down, I could see the sparkles running up and down the tie, and I thought, oh, this is going to be good. But what was said, I was like, well, this is rubbish. I cannot go along with any of this. But other times I've sat there and just gone, wow, that was so powerful.
It's interesting because I always find that whenever I watch trance, I always do it with my eyes closed, because I feel that then I am more inexperienced. Otherwise, I find myself I'm more getting absorbed in what the medium's looking like, looking for the ectoplasm lorry that's meant to be coming across one's face. But I do find that I feel much more in the experience. And so I even said to Eileen Davis a little while ago, like, I would love you to record some of your, trance sittings, because some of the wisdom that has come through is so off the chart that, I feel that a lot needs to be done to get that out there to humanity. And actually, that's something I've just started doing on the podcast, is once a month having a medium called Nico, who's a trance medium, an American man, come on, and we're going to put questions from the audience to Spirit whilst in the trance state in a monthly live Q&A. So trying to bring trance lorry to the masses. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's interesting.
The thing is, when we're working in that deep and altered state, it's remembering that there are many schools of thought in the spirit world. We have this thing because, again, we are physical beings. I touch it, it's there, it's told, it exists. If I don't press anything, I can cut you off. Anyway, so when we say, and this is a common phrase I hear people say, I'm looking for the truth, or I'm going to speak the truth. Well, actually, my truth is going to be different to yours. It's going to be different to everybody in the room tonight and everybody who listens to this at a later date. It's that blending, that understanding, and going, okay, yeah, that's fine. Like I said about the medium I saw, I was out there going rubbish, but the gate, it's a different school of thought.
It is.
And even though in the deepest of altered states, the mind of the medium is still present. It is still present. We've got a wonderful gentleman, Mark Stone. His trance is sublime. It's beautiful. It's always a privilege to be a part of. But over the years of listening to him, there's been the odd occasions where you can hear his voice come back in and then settle back into the communicator. And I was like, what's happening there then, Mark? Why is this happening? He said, because I felt they were going to talk about something that I didn't want to talk about. And I thought, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, that.
His mind kicked in at that point, and
yeah, because
control
there was
back.
A topic coming up that, as a person, I don't want to share that topic. So
you're actually saying something interesting there, because that happened recently to a trance medium who I know who held back something and decided to. So it's interesting you say that, because that's not the first time I've heard of that, actually.
Well, again, it underlies that thing with the altered state of awareness. You are never truly 100, because we have ourself. It's personal. It's us. They're saying it. I mean, even in a legal thing, if you went into a trance state and said something totally outrageous and you went to court, they would not recognize the trance state. You have said it. But in the fact and the art and the making of sharing wisdom, philosophy, prophecy from the other world, there is always going to be, the mind of the medium is always indelibly intertwined with that communication.
Well, you would think that trance wasn't the case, and actually for a long time I believe that trance was getting the mind completely out of the way, but that's, as you said, that's not the case.
No, you've got to forge that. This is my understanding, and people out there, if you don't agree, you know what, that's great, but you just got to forge that depth. It's like with our friends, physical, we've got circles of friends, haven't we?
Yes.
Got, oh, hi, how are you, Waffle? Oh yeah, how's work? Da 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 da. And then the inner circle comes in. You go, oh, hi, what's going on? How's the relationship going, or whatever? And then we have another inner circle, don't we? And go, do you know what? I really need to vent, and I know I can vent with you. If they do that one more time, I'm going to cut. And it's a similar process with the spirit world, that we've just got to get that comfort, that trust, but never lose our uniqueness, because what's to say in these altered states of working, this is not your higher self talking?
That's a very good point and a very good question.
So, yeah, it's fascinating. And again, this is the beauty of what we do, because there is so much to discuss, explore, try and understand, but again, avoiding the truth, because whatever we learn today will open up the doors to 28 different thoughts tomorrow.
Very wise words, Laurie, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. It had to happen sooner or later. I've been waiting 64 years for that, and finally it's happened. Hurrah! Just back to a comment here, going back on the prophecy thread. True and the prophecy thing. Literally had dreams, or even certain spirits predict haunting experiences I've had, or things of that nature. I mean, if you go back in the history of what we understand as spiritualism, taking away the organized religion side of it, but going back to BC times, tribes would have seers who would talk about the coming year. They would talk about droughts. They would talk about flood. They would talk about famine. They would talk about plenty. I mean, that's always been there. Again, maybe not down to the nth degree, you know, on the 16th of March, that army is going to come over the hill, but it would lay the ground, pave the ground in readiness. So things...
We could get our battle armor on, so to speak.
Definitely, yeah. Or we're going to plant more crops because there's famine coming, or whatever. Oh, here we go. Question. Good question. Corinne, good evening. Welcome. Is there a heaven? What's your thought?
Not in the literal sense that we get to the gates up there and then we're sort of sat there when we've decided where to go. I feel that when we go to the spirit world, we go to another frequency of consciousness. But I don't think it is as literal as what we go. I think it is a heaven. I actually have come to the conclusion that I think down here is you know, our hell in some ways, and our learning, our place to learn and grow and develop our soul. But no, I don't think it's like that. I think that we go to a place beyond time, space, where we can literally go anywhere at any time. I always think it's amazing that, you know, we can sit down as mediums and literally go to do a reading and there's always someone there. You know, even that in itself, you know, I find fascinating. But, you know, I do think the spirit world is like heaven, but I don't think it's heaven in the sense that we, you know, probably imagine we're going to be sitting there on a fluffy cloud and, you know, eating grapes and a harp playing for us. I don't think it's quite in that sense. But I guess it depends on your version of heaven, doesn't it?
Exactly. Thank you, Corinne. Really good question.
It is a good question.
It links in with earlier topics. I'm not sure when you joined us, Corinne, but it links in with earlier topics through tonight of we were just talking about the truth. Well, there isn't the truth. There is your truth. There is my truth. There is Jason's truth. There is Cat Goddess truth, Debbie Romero's truth. And they will all differ. They are true to the people speaking them at that time, because our truths can change tomorrow. So is there a heaven? There is a change. Many of the old books, and we're talking like 1900s, 1930s, and they talk about spirit lands. And there is a common theme. They don't describe it. There's no description of things. But there is a very common theme of going to a place of peace. There is going to a place, you know, if as I said earlier, my idea, I've said when I cross over, I want to be back at the Queen concert in 1976 at Nebworth. And that's going to be my heaven. But I'm not going to be there forever because that concert's going to finish and then I'm going to go off and explore.
Yes.
Similar with everybody crossing over. Somebody said something once that really stuck with me because we talk about different vibrations, different energies and things like that. And they said, a lot of people, that doesn't feel right to them. If your idea of heaven is a rose-covered cottage in the middle of a field with an open fire, then do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if that's not what you find. But after a while, this realization comes in that you don't need a bed because you don't need to sleep, and then you don't need to eat, and you don't need to drink. Wonderful account of that in Many Mansions, Lord Dowding. And there was an account of an airman who crossed over and he knew he'd passed, but he was still in the battlefield. And he went, oh, this is a bit rum, talk of the day. And he went, God, I could do with a drink. And he had a whiskey in his hand. So he drank his whiskey and he went, oh, that's better. I want another one. He had another whiskey in his hand. He got halfway through it and he said, I then realized I didn't need it anymore. And I thought that's fascinating because it's that losing of the physicality. So your rose-covered cottage with the food on the table, in time you would, this is only a scenario, in time you would realize, well, actually I don't need food. I don't need water. I don't need bed. So if I don't need a bed, I don't need a bedroom. So why do I need a house? It's this evolution. I hope that.
But apparently, even in that book, that Red Cloud book, I think it even talks about that if you do want a house in the spirit world and you have a need for it, then that is also possible as well. You can have a house, but if you don't need it, you don't want it in the spirit world because we have no attachment to anything. Yeah. So it's a difficult concept to even try and digest and swallow.
It is
at times.
It's that transition because we can't just drop our physicality because we've spent many years in our physical existence and we've grown accustomed to that. That doesn't end with death. That stays with us. So we go through a process, I suppose you could call it an unlearning or relearning of what is real and what is temporary, because all this is temporary.
Well, it is. I've even started to think that I'm spending a good proportion of the next years of my life unlearning a lot of what I've learned in the first few years of my life. Or the conditioning and certain things that I need to undo. Limiting beliefs, things that limit us. Sometimes we have to unlearn some of the things we think we know.
Yeah, very true. And give ourselves the ability to do that because we see it, and it's not just in spiritualism, it's in all the major orthodoxies and ways of life and philosophies, that when people become dogmatic about things and say, well, this is here we go again, the truth. And if you don't adhere to the truth, you are going to go wrong. Well, actually, where's the learning in that? Where's the growth in that? Where's the ability to debate that? Because otherwise we end up rebelling against it. So you've got one side being very firm and structured, saying this is the truth, no further. The other side trying to understand it and debate it and not getting the debate back. So they then become the protagonists because I need to get through that. It's really interesting. Anyway. Thank you, Corinne. It's learned behavior. Yeah, really good. Jason, you little sweetheart, you've been absolutely wonderful.
I've loved it. Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure.
An honor. Thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting tonight. So as I said, I'll put it back in again, the link to Jason's YouTube.
Yes, I very much enjoyed it. Thank you for everyone for coming.
So the link is in there. Please explore his podcast. You might find one from me in there, but you don't have to listen to it.
It was actually a really interesting episode. We covered a lot of really interesting things. So,
good.
I found it interesting to listen back. So thank you.
Yeah. And you never know. We may meet at the college on the open day if you're going to go up there.
We may.
I'll tell you what, you drive up here and you can come up on the coach with us, but you have to be here at 6 a.m. So good luck with that, love.
That is an early start, isn't it?
Oh God, it's such a long day. We leave Poole at 6, and we get.
Do you do the little announcement on the microphone in the front of the coach to round everyone up, and you're the tour guide?
Yeah, so I do all that, and we have a quiz. There's normally a bottle of bubbly for the prize, and then we get off. We have a comfort break, and you've got to make sure that 48 get off, that 48 get back on, hopefully. All good fun, but it's worth it.
Good fun and games.
Yeah. Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's so appreciated, and thank you for the conversation. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Big thank you to everybody out there who's joined us, whether live tonight or who will be watching this later on catch up. Thank you. Just remember, you can watch a Spiritualist Church service live to view at home every Sunday from here at Poole Church on Facebook and YouTube. Tomorrow we have David Powell, CSNU, will be leading our service. But in the meantime, it's a very good night from me, and
it's a very good night from me.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.